folks. Today we're going to talk about Ricky. All right. Ricky and Melissa in The Cured were actually the very first people who asked to be in one of my books, and I was very, very happy that that was an option because, as you probably all know by now, I really, really suck at coming up with character names. I'm really terrible at it. Really, really bad. So, I am super, super, super happy when people volunteer names. If you don't know, I do take a list of names on my Facebook page all the time. I have a running list and I pick from that to um, make all of my characters because I'm really terrible at getting normal sounding names, I guess, is the best way to put it. I don't mean generic. I don't want generic names. Although, when we get to Henry, I'll tell you about that name. It's kind of funny, actually. Um, I just want names that people actually inhabit. I didn't want, um, like fantasy names, for example. Like, I didn't want weird, you know, the only person named this is this character in the book name. So that's part of why I ask you guys for names, and Ricky and Melissa were the first to say yes. They are family friends, and I needed, especially for the first book that they're in, The Cured. I needed a lot of people because I knew that we were going to be following the people that Frank and Nella cured during the first book. So I knew that that was where we were going to start, and I needed at least six names along with all the other characters, but I knew I was starting with that. So Ricky is based on a friend. He does not look like Ricky in the book, and it is not my brother Ricky, it's different Ricky. Um, uh, a lot of you probably already know. I was a bartender for a really, really, really long time. Mostly before I started writing these books, actually. I do other things now for um, my secondary job, but when I was bartending for most of my bartending life, which was about 12 or 13 years long, actually, I think it might have been longer than that. Um, Smoking in bars was legal, and even in restaurants in Maine until I don't know the last 4 years maybe that I was bartending. There was no smoking in bars, um, and I had a lot of friends and coworkers who were very, very, very addicted to smoking. In fact, I have one friend who actually Vincent's appearance is based on, not his character, but his appearance is based on, that tried to quit every single year I knew him, and I knew him for almost 20 years, and just really, really tried and was just very bad at it. And then my husband actually also smoked for a very long time, and it took him three tries to stop smoking. So if you're trying to stop smoking, man, I get it. It is rough. It is really, really hard, and my heart goes out to you, and I hope you're staying strong, especially now that all the New Year's resolutions are coming up and everything. If you're trying to quit, I support you, man. You can yell at me and be grumpy with me all you want to get through those cravings. But I wanted Ricky to kind of be that at the when he wakes up, that's the first thing he thinks about really is where am I going to find a smoke? So, one of the pieces here is actually rolling papers. I put some zombie jokes on rolling papers. Um, and I wanted that to be a major thing for him, is just craving that old society in the idea of obviously cigarettes, but also like he knows that the old world wasn't good for him, just like the cigarettes weren't good for him, but he still wanted it back anyway. So that's a big thing with him. Um, I also think he realizes even when he's looking for stale cigarettes with Henry that they're going to taste awful. They're going to be terrible. But he still wants them. Um, so the reason that Ricky is the way he is, that he tells inappropriate jokes and is kind of crass and stuff, partially probably has to do with me working in bars for a long, really long time, but it also has to do with my mental health at the time. So I had just finished After the Cure. Like I said, I started this book directly after finishing After the Cure. Like I wasn't even done editing After the Cure when I started writing The Cured. Um, so I was like editing. So I had one computer at the time in the entire house, and like it wasn't even mine, it was my husband's computer. So when he was at work, I would edit um, After the Cure and do like book cover stuff, all the stuff that you have to do in the background. And at night when he was home, so I would do this when because I only had very limited time. Again, the boys were 3 to 6 months old. Laura was barely in school. I think she was in half day kindergarten at the time. So I had really, really limited time with a computer to actually edit. So the rest of the time, like when I was in doctor's offices or, when the kids were napping in the afternoon or evening when Tim was home and he was on his computer, I would um, longhand write uh, The Cured. And I actually ended up I longhand wrote every book up to Povalia. I think Povalia was the first time I had my own computer in the house, that we could afford a computer for me to work on. It's not not anything with bells and whistles, let me tell you. Not even now. Not especially after the fire. Like not even now. But it is basically it's a typewriter, basically a typewriter that I don't have to get ink cartridges for. So anyhow, that's how fast I was writing The Cured. So as soon as I ended the last sentences of After the Cure, I was already like thinking of the next book. So because of that, and because of how dark the end of After the Cure got, um, I knew that I needed something to lighten things up a little bit, or I was gonna have problems. So part of the way, even now, it's been 13 years since the end of After the Cure, I think. But and I've written, I think we're on book 17. I can't remember. But even after all these books, I know that I'm getting toward the end and I need to finish. Like I'm getting toward the end of my mental health abilities when I start having nightmares about the book that I'm working on. It happens usually the last month or two of drafting. And I knew that even then, so After the Cure was actually my second book um, that I published, not the second book I finished, but the second book that I put out. Um, so I had already established a pattern that this was going to happen, and I knew that this book was going to be real, real dark. In fact, originally, the first half of The Cured did not exist when I originally wrote it. It started in that scene where they're waking up. That was the first scene I wrote, was the scene where they were all waking up in the farmhouse. And I knew that I needed something lighter and someone lighter to break things up, both for me and the other characters. Like, especially with what we were going to be talking about, was so dark and so depressing because it was the first book where we were going into the mind of somebody who had been infected and had done terrible, terrible things and was going to have to slowly realize what they'd done. Now, obviously, it's not as dark as, say, uh, in the second series, The Infected, or um, the next book, Crisis, like waking up and figuring things out. But it was going to be heavy. And I don't think that everybody processes things in the same way, dark or otherwise. And I really thought that having somebody that was a little bitter, but not in a I want to end the world kind of way, like bitter in a nihilistic, like, this is bullshit. um, you know, we I didn't do this kind of way. This shouldn't be on me kind of way, was kind of an outlet. And Rickey was meant to be that really snarky, you know, survivor, practical person who's also really skeptical of other people's both anger and grief at themselves when he doesn't feel like anything they did was really intentional, it wasn't their fault, and of their what appears to be well-meaning charity, basically. Like, he is very suspicious of the city, but he also would have, even if he hadn't been infected, he would be very suspicious of the city anyway, because his life before the infection was also very um, prone to being crushed by authority. He had a criminal backstory. He had a hard time with poverty with his mom. And the way that he survived that first part of the infection was because of depending upon himself and his mom and nobody else. Like, nobody came to help him, either before he got out of prison or, after. And is very he wants he wants to be accepted by a group. He likes his friends, and that's why he sticks with them. But he doesn't like having to depend on anyone else, especially people that didn't go through what he did. The reason he trusts Henry and Melissa and Vincent and Molly and Pam is because he knows that they've all been through the same thing. They were there. They were there at the camp with him. Henry was there before he was. They've gone through the same thing. So that is why he thinks they're okay. Everybody else has to work super extra hard to be liked by him. And I really like his character. I think if he has kind of an echo later on, it would be, so in the Scapegoat series, there's this character named Roscoe. And I think they kind of come from the same place, the same personality, my same fear of letting anyone have too much authority over me. Um, and I think it's easy to misunderstand Rickey as a character as not taking anything seriously, or not, um, not having compassion where I think he actually really does. He just is bad about showing it. Like when Vincent says to him when they're trying to decide whether to leave the city, he tells Ricky, "I know you're a good man. It's Henry I'm worried about." When, you know, if you look just at kind of what you would assume that a main character would be, Henry should be the quote unquote good one and Ricky should be the problem one. But Vincent knows that Ricky is more committed to being kind, to being good to the people he loves than Henry is, because Henry's driven by vengeance and the need for justice, and Ricky would like justice, I'm sure, but he is more willing to give that up if it means that he and his friends have a safe, happy life. He's willing to forget Phil even exists, even after all he's been through, if it means he doesn't ever have to be that scared or hurt again, which I don't think is a bad thing. So, anyway, um, the zombie jokes we have uh, are mostly I found on my own, but some of them have been volunteered by readers. So these are a couple new ones that I found. So I'll read them to you just so you have them. The first one is, "Why shouldn't you tell zombie jokes? Henry thinks they're in bad taste." um, "Why do zombies hate to be late for dinner? Because they always get the cold shoulder." And "What does a zombie call a stoner? A pot roast." um, the jokes were just a way for him to say things are getting too serious, we need to take a break. Like, there is a character motivation for those jokes to be there. It is still one of my favorite things to find a stupid pun to throw in there. And I do think that if I were going to write another story about the cured, about Henry and Melissa and Ricky and the cured colony, I think that Ricky would make a very good main character, but I think it would be a very different type of story. It would be very practical, it'd be very bitter, it'd be very angry, which I think in some seasons of my life would have been and might still be a good thing. When I was writing this, I was trying not for that to be the main takeaway. So Henry became the main character instead. Anyhow, that's about all I have to say for Ricky, I guess. I think we'll probably talk about him a little more when we get to Melissa. Um, if you have any questions about him, I think, like I said, I think he's a really interesting character and I really like him. And he's probably closer to my actual personality than I would like to admit. um, he's not based on anyone despite having a name based on somebody. So that's another thing for you to know. If you volunteer your name, the character's probably not going to have your personality unless it's purely by chance. Unless you ask for that to be the case, and then, I'll try to oblige. But it's purely a name thing. So, as the other Ricky would tell you. All right. Next time we are going to talk about Gray, who is probably the one and only purely evil villain I have, which is debatable, but I think so. We'll talk about him next time. All right. We'll see you then.